I stood on the freezing porch, barefoot in the dead of winter, listening to my mother's command to leave. Inside my thin coat pocket, my fingers curled around a piece of heavy metal. It was my grandfather's old card, the one he insisted I use only when I had no other choice. The next morning, I slid that card across the counter, and the bank manager went pale, looking as if he had seen a ghost from 20 years ago. My name is Maisie Young. I am 32 years old, and last night, 10 days before Christmas, my life fit into a single, black, hefty trash bag. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was louder than the wind. It was a final, mechanical judgment that severed me from the warmth, the food, and the life I had known. I stood there on the porch, the wood planks beneath my bare feet already leaching the heat from my body. The snow was not falling gently. It was coming down in hard, stinging pellets that felt like sand-blasted glass against my cheeks. I looked down at the plastic bag in my hand. It was cinched tight with a yellow tie. Inside was a random assortment of my existence: a pair of jeans, 3 t-shirts, a bottle of shampoo, and my laptop charger. I did not even have the laptop. My mother had kept that, claiming it was purchased with family funds and therefore remained family property. I walked to my car. It was a 10-year-old sedan that sounded like a dying tractor when it idled, but it was the only thing legally in my name. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice into the snow. The second time, I had to drop to my knees to find them, my fingers scraping against the frozen gravel. When I finally got the door open and threw the trash bag into the passenger seat, I let out a scream that no one heard. The wind took it and scattered it across the manicured lawns of the subdivision. I sat in the driver's seat, shivering violently. I turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed, and then roared to life with a reluctant whine. I cranked the heat, but I knew from experience it would take 10 minutes to blow anything other than Arctic air. The fight had been about a signature. That was it. Just ink on paper. My father, Gordon, had sat at the head of the table, pushing a document toward me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. He called it a bridge loan for a new venture. I read the fine print. It was a high-risk personal loan for $50,000, secured against my credit and my future, to cover a margin call on an investment he had botched months ago. When I refused, the veneer of the happy family dissolved. My mother, Marla, did not scream. She never screamed. She just went cold. She told me that if I was not willing to contribute to the family's survival, I had no right to consume the family's resources. I checked my phone. 14% battery. I needed a place to sleep. I needed a friend. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hovering over names I had known since high school. I tapped on Jessica's name. We had been best friends for 6 years. I remembered the last time I saw her. The pity in her eyes, the way she pulled her purse closer when I sat down. I pressed the call button. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Sarah. 1 ring, 2 rings, decline. Then a text from Sarah popped up. Please stop calling. Maisie, Marla told us about the relapse. We hope you get the help you need. But I can't have that energy around my kids. I stared at the screen, the blue light blurring through the tears welling in my eyes. The relapse. That was the narrative this time. I had never touched a drug in my life. I barely drank wine. But Marla was a master architect of reality. Over the last 2 years, she had systematically planted seeds in every social circle we moved in. Maisie is unstable. Maisie is having episodes. Maisie is stealing from us to fund a habit. She had cut my safety net string by string, so that when she finally pushed me off the ledge, there would be no one to catch me. I was alone. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway, leaving the only home I had ever known. I did not look back. If I looked back, I might have turned around and begged, and if I signed those papers, I would be paying for my father's mistakes for the next 20 years. I drove aimlessly for an hour. The gas light dinged, a cheerful little sound that signaled impending disaster. I pulled into a 24-hour gas station near the interstate entrance ramp. It was the kind of place bathed in harsh, flickering sodium lights, where truckers slept and the coffee tasted like battery acid. I parked in the darkest corner of the lot. Away from the store entrance, I killed the engine to save gas. The silence rushed in, heavy and suffocating. I pulled up my banking app. The screen refreshed. A spinning circle of doom. Then the number appeared. $214.83. That was my net worth. $214. It would not even cover a week at a cheap motel. I could buy food, or I could buy gas. But I could not buy safety. I curled my legs up to my chest, trying to preserve body heat. My coat was a stylish wool blend, meant for walking from a heated car to a heated office, not for surviving a winter night in a parking lot. I buried my hands deep into the pockets. My fingers brushed against something cold and hard. It was colder than the air, smoother than glass. I pulled it out. In the dim amber light of the street lamp, the card looked like a shard of midnight. It was heavy, made of black metal, with no magnetic strip and no chip. There were no numbers embossed on the front, only a name etched in silver script, Walter Duval, and beneath it, in much smaller letters, the name of an institution I had never heard of before tonight, Irongate Heritage and Trust. My grandfather. I closed my eyes and the memory washed over me, sharper than the cold. I was 12 years old. We were in his study, a room that smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. My parents hated him. They called him a miser, a dinosaur, a man who didn't understand modern finance. They were waiting for him to die so they could liquidate his estate. He had called me in. His voice raspy but his eyes clear and blue, untouched by the dementia my mother claimed he had. He pressed this piece of metal into my palm. It felt alien, like something from another century. "Listen to me, Maisie," he had said. "This is not an ATM card. You cannot buy shoes with this. You cannot buy lunch with this." I had asked him what it was for. "It is a door," he whispered, leaning in conspiratorially, checking the open door to ensure my parents were not listening. "Life is going to be hard for you, little bird. Your mother, she consumes, and your father follows. One day, they will corner you. They will take everything they think they own, and they think they own you." I had tried to protest, to defend them, but he squeezed my hand. "Keep this hidden. Do not let them see it. And when the day comes that you are standing on the edge of a cliff, and you have no money, no home, and nowhere to turn, only then do you take this to the address on the back." I opened my eyes. The metal warmed slightly in my grip. For 20 years, I had kept this card hidden in the lining of old purses, in jewelry boxes with false bottoms, and finally, in the pocket of this coat. I had almost thrown it away a dozen times. I had told myself Grandpa was paranoid, that he was just a bitter old man trying to drive a wedge between me and my parents. But tonight, shivering in a car that smelled of stale French fries and fear, I realized he had been the only one who saw the future. He had seen this night. He had seen the trash bag. He had seen the empty bank account. I flipped the card over. The address was etched in tiny coordinates and a street name in the financial district downtown. I checked the time. It was 3 a.m. I could not sleep, but I forced myself to close my eyes. If I stayed awake, the panic would win. The panic would tell me to drive back, to pound on the door, to sign the loan, to apologize for being a burden. I had to fight the conditioning of 32 years. I had to fight the voice in my head that sounded exactly like Marla, telling me I was worthless without them. I wrapped my arms around myself. The cold seeped through the windows, frosting the glass on the inside. I drifted into a fitful, shallow sleep, punctuated by the sound of semi-trucks shifting gears on the highway and the terrifying thought that someone might smash the window and drag me out. I woke up with the sun. My neck was stiff, and my feet were numb blocks of ice. The world outside was bright and aggressively normal. People were pumping gas, drinking coffee, going to jobs they probably hated, but at least provided them with a heating bill. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My mascara had smeared into dark bruises under my eyes. My hair was a bird's nest. I looked exactly like what my mother said I was a disaster. I picked up the card from the dashboard where I had left it. In the daylight, it looked even more imposing. It did not look like a banking product. It looked like a weapon. Iron Gate Heritage and Trust. I pulled out my phone. 6% battery. I typed the name into the browser. No website, no marketing, no Yelp reviews. Just a single address. Listed in a business registry from 1924. Maybe it was closed. Maybe it was a hallucination of an old man. Maybe I would drive there and find a Starbucks or a vacant lot. But what choice did I have? I started the car. The gas needle was hovering just above the red line. I had enough fuel to get downtown, but probably not enough to get back. This was a one-way trip. The drive into the city was slow. The morning traffic was a river of red taillights. I felt invisible in my beat-up car, a ghost haunting the morning commute. I looked at the other drivers, men in suits, women applying lipstick, and wondered if any of them were one argument away from a trash bag and a cold night. I found the address at 9 in the morning. It was not a skyscraper. It was a squat, formidable building nestled between two towering glass structures, like a bulldog sitting between two greyhounds. The facade was gray stone, heavy and uninviting. There was no signage, no neon open sign, no hours of operation posted on the door, just a heavy brass plaque next to the entrance that read, Iron Gate. I parked illegally 3 blocks away because I could not afford the garage fees. I grabbed my purse. I left the trash bag in the car. If this didn't work, I didn't want to be carrying my life in a sack when I was told to leave. The walk to the bank felt like a march to the gallows. The wind tunnel created by the skyscrapers whipped my hair across my face. My coat was wrinkled. My boots were scuffed. I was painfully aware of how I looked. I was a vagrant in designer clothes that had seen better days. I stopped at the bottom of the steps. They were marble, white with gray veins, swept clean of snow. They looked slippery. I touched the card in my pocket again. It was the only solid thing in my world. It is a door, Grandpa had said. I took a breath that rattled in my chest. I thought of my father's smug face as he slid the loan papers across the mahogany table. I thought of my mother's voice, smooth as silk, telling my friends I was a junkie. I could go back. I could beg. I could be their puppet for the rest of my life, safe and warm and dead inside. Or I could walk up these stairs and see what lay behind the door. My hand was trembling as I pulled it out of my pocket, but I clenched my jaw. I felt a spark of anger ignite in my gut. Hot and sharp. It burned through the shame. It burned through the fear. I was not going back. I lifted my chin. I fixed my eyes on the heavy double doors at the top of the stairs. They were made of dark wood and polished brass, imposing and silent. I took the first step, then the second. By the time I reached the top, I wasn't just cold anymore. I was ready. I pushed the heavy door open and stepped out of the blinding winter light and into the shadows of the past. The silence inside the bank was not peaceful. It was heavy. The kind of pressurized quiet you feel deep underwater. The moment the heavy wooden doors swung shut behind me, the roar of the city traffic was severed, replaced by the soft hum of ventilation and the rhythmic, muted clicking of keyboards. I stood on the plush runner rug, water dripping from the hem of my coat onto the pristine floor. The lobby was cavernous, dominated by high ceilings with intricate crown molding and chandeliers that looked like they belonged in a ballroom rather than a financial institution. There were no velvet ropes, no plastic pens on chains, and no cheerful posters advertising low-interest credit cards. There were just 3 massive desks spaced far apart, made of dark mahogany that shone under the warm lights. I felt the eyes immediately. A security guard stood near a marble pillar. He did not look like the guards at the grocery store. He wore a dark suit, an earpiece, and his posture was military. His gaze swept over me, cataloging the mud on my boots, the exhaustion in my posture, and the desperate, wind-blown tangle of my hair. He did not move to stop me, but his body tensed, shifting his weight forward onto the balls of his feet. I walked toward the center desk. The receptionist was a woman who looked like she had been carved out of ivory. Her hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it pulled the skin of her temples taut. She was typing, her manicured fingers moving with fluid grace. As I approached, she stopped and looked up. Her smile was practiced, a thin veneer of politeness that failed to mask the flicker of distaste in her eyes. She looked at my coat, then at my face, and I knew exactly what she saw: a woman who had lost control of her life. I cleared my throat. My voice felt rusty, unused to speaking in a place that demanded such hushed reverence. "I need to speak to a manager," I said. The woman raised a single, perfectly arched eyebrow. Her gaze dipped to my empty hands. I had left my purse tight against my side, trying to look smaller, less intrusive. "Do you have an appointment, miss?" she asked. Her tone suggested that she already knew the answer. "No," I said, "I do not have an appointment, but I have this." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the black metal card. My fingers were still numb from the cold, and the movement was clumsy. I placed the card on the polished mahogany surface. It made a dull, heavy thud, a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet room. The receptionist looked down at it. She did not touch it immediately. She frowned, her professional mask slipping for a fraction of a second. It was not a credit card. It had no magnetic strip, no chip, no embossed numbers, just the name Walter Duvall and the bank's old logo etched into the matte black surface. She reached out with 2 fingers and slid it closer to her, treating it like a foreign object that might be contaminated. She flipped it over, then looked back at me, her expression hardening. "I am sorry," she said, her voice dropping a few degrees. "We do not accept novelty items or unauthorized tokens here. If you are looking to open a standard checking account, I can direct you to our consumer branch on—" "Please," I interrupted, the desperation clawing at my throat. "Just show it to someone. Please," she sighed. A short, sharp exhale through her nose. She was about to dismiss me, to signal the guard who was now taking a step toward us, when a door opened behind the counter. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him with the precision of armor. He held a tablet in one hand and was looking down at a spreadsheet, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked to be about 40, with sharp features and the kind of restless energy that suggested he drank too much espresso and slept too little. "Mr. Caldwell," the receptionist said, her voice instantly smoothing into deference. "I apologize for the interruption. This young woman was just leaving." The man, Miles Caldwell, looked up. His eyes were gray and intelligent, scanning the scene with rapid efficiency. He looked at me, taking in my disheveled appearance without judgment, only calculation. Then his gaze dropped to the desk. He froze. It was not a figure of speech. He physically stopped moving. His hand, which had been reaching up to adjust his tie, halted in midair. The tablet in his other hand lowered slowly to his side. He stared at the black metal rectangle on the mahogany wood as if it were a live grenade that had just had the pin pulled. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. The receptionist looked from me to Caldwell, confusion rippling across her face. The guard stopped his approach. Sensing the shift in the atmosphere, Caldwell took a breath. It was a slow, measured intake of air. He walked around the desk, ignoring his employee completely. He stopped 2 feet in front of me. He did not look at my face. He reached down and picked up the card. He held it by the edges, treating it with a reverence that bordered on fear. He tilted it slightly, catching the light on the small, indented crest in the corner. He swallowed. I saw his Adam's apple bob in his throat. When he finally looked at me, the professional detachment was gone. In its place was a look of intense, piercing scrutiny. He was not looking at a vagrant anymore. He was looking at a puzzle he had been trained to solve but never expected to see. "Do you have identification?" he asked. His voice was low, urgent. It was not the customer service voice. It was the voice of a man following a very specific, very serious protocol. I nodded. My hands shook as I dug my driver's license out of my pocket. I handed it to him. He looked at the name on the plastic card. Maisie Young. He looked at the photo, then back at my face, comparing the features, verifying the eyes, the jawline. He handed the license back to me, but he kept the black card tight in his grip. "Are you alone?" he asked. The question threw me. I expected him to ask what I wanted, or how I got the card, but he was scanning the lobby, looking past me at the glass doors, at the street outside. Yes, I whispered. I am alone. He nodded once, sharp and decisive. Come with me. He did not wait for an answer. He turned and walked toward the heavy oak door he had come from. He did not look back to see if I was following. He knew I would. I glanced at the receptionist. She was staring at Caldwell's back with her mouth slightly open, her composure completely shattered. I followed him. The office was large, soundproofed, and smelled of leather and old books. He closed the door behind us, and I heard the distinct click of a heavy lock engaging. The noise of the outside world, already faint in the lobby, vanished completely here. It was just the two of us and the low hum of a computer server tower under his desk. Sit down, Ms. Young, he said. He did not sit behind his desk. He went to a wall panel and typed in a code. The blinds on the glass wall facing the lobby descended automatically, cutting us off from view. The room felt suddenly smaller, more intimate, and infinitely more dangerous. I sat in one of the leather armchairs. It was soft, swallowing my exhausted frame. I kept my coat on. I was still cold, a chill that seemed to be radiating from my bones rather than the air. Caldwell moved to his desk. He sat down and placed the black card on a velvet pad next to his keyboard. He woke up his computer. His fingers flew across the keys. He was not just logging in. He was navigating through layers of security. I saw him type a long string of characters, pause, wait for a prompt, and type another. He stopped. I watched his face. The blue light from the monitors washed over his features. He blinked. Once, twice. He leaned in closer to the screen. I could not see what he was reading, but I saw the reflection of a red banner flashing in his glasses. It pulsed with a slow, warning rhythm. Legacy key, he murmured, almost to himself. Do not disclose in lobby. Level 0 protocol. My heart hammered against my ribs. I thought I was in trouble. I thought the police were being called silently. I gripped the arms of the chair, my knuckles turning white. Is there a problem? I asked, my voice trembling. If the card is expired, I can leave. I did not mean to cause trouble. Caldwell looked up. The intensity in his eyes had softened into something else, something like awe mixed with pity. No, Ms. Young, he said quietly. You cannot leave. Not yet. He swiveled his chair to face me fully. He clasped his hands together and rested them on his knees. This card is not expired, he said. It is impossible for it to expire, but it is also not a debit card. It is not a credit card. It is an instrument that has not been seen in this branch for nearly 20 years. In fact, most of the staff out there believe these accounts are urban legends used to train new hires on compliance history. He picked up the card again, running his thumb over the edge. It is linked to a protected profile. He continued, a dormant asset structure established by Walter Duval. The system has flagged this as a break-glass event. He looked me in the eye. The protocol for this card requires me to ask you a specific set of questions before we can proceed. The answers must be recorded. Do you understand? I nodded, though I understood nothing. Ms. Young, he said, his voice formal, stripping away any casualness. Why are you here today? I looked at my hands, the dirt under my fingernails, the shaking. I was kicked out. I said, my voice broke on the words. My parents. They put me out. I have nowhere to go. I have no money. I have no access to my things. Caldwell did not offer a tissue. He did not say he was sorry. He turned back to his keyboard and typed. The sound of the keys was like gunshots in the quiet room. Subject reports involuntary displacement, he said as he typed, speaking the words aloud as if dictating to the machine. Lack of resources. Severance of family support structures. He stopped typing and looked at me again. Did Walter Duval give you this card directly? Yes. I said, years ago. And did he give you instructions? He told me. I hesitated. It sounded so melodramatic in the harsh light of a bank office. He told me to use it only when I had no other choice. When I was cornered. Caldwell typed again. Condition met, last resort activation. Subject confirms instructions. He hit the enter key with a finality that made me jump. The red light on his screen disappeared, replaced by a steady green glow. He exhaled. a long sigh that seemed to deflate his rigid posture. He stood up. "Ms. Young," he said, "you thought you were coming here to beg for a loan, or perhaps to see if there was a few $100s left in an old savings account." I did not answer. "That was exactly what I had hoped for. You were wrong," he said. He walked over to a large safe set into the wall behind his desk. He spun the dial left, right, left. The heavy steel door clicked and swung open. The interior was not filled with stacks of cash. It was filled with rows of safety deposit boxes and a few thick solitary envelopes sitting on the top shelf. He reached in and took out a thick envelope made of heavy, cream-colored paper. It was sealed with red wax. The same crest from the card pressed into the center. The paper looked old, slightly yellowed at the edges. He brought it back to the desk and placed it in front of me. He sat down, his expression somber. "Walter Duval came to me 5 years before he died," Caldwell said softly. "I was just a junior associate then. He was lucid, sharp as a tack, and very specific. He told me that his family was going to eat itself alive, and that you would be the meal." I stared at the envelope. My name was written on the front in my grandfather's shaky but elegant handwriting. "Maisie." "He gave me this envelope," Caldwell continued, "and he gave me a strict instruction. He said it was to remain in the vault, untouched, regardless of any court order or family demand. It was only to be retrieved if Maisie Young walked into this bank, alone, holding the black iron card, and stated clearly that she had no home to return to." Caldwell pushed the envelope an inch closer to me. He knew this day would come. "Ms. Young, he wrote the script for it, and you just played your part perfectly." I reached out and touched the envelope. The paper was cold, but the wax seal felt like it was burning my fingertips. "What is it?" I whispered. Caldwell leaned back in his chair, a strange look on his face. It was the look of a man who had just watched a bomb go off and was waiting for the shockwave to hit. "That," he said, "is the truth, and unfortunately for your parents, it is also the detonator." The red wax seal did not break easily. It was thick and stubborn, resisting my trembling fingers, as if it knew that once it was shattered, there was no going back to the oblivion of ignorance. I used my thumbnail to crack the center, the sound sharp and brittle in the quiet office. A jagged line split the crest of Irongate Heritage and Trust. I peeled the edges back and slid the contents onto the velvet pad of Miles Caldwell's desk. There was a smell that rose from the papers, a scent of pipe tobacco and cedar that hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was the scent of my grandfather's study, a room I had been barred from entering for the last decade of his life. The first item was a handwritten letter. The ink was blue, the strokes firm and angular. It was dated 5 years ago. "My dearest Maisie," it began. I felt a sob catch in my throat, a hard lump that hurt to swallow. I had not been called dearest by anyone in a very long time. "If you are reading this, it means they have done the thing I feared most. It means Gordon and Marla have finally succeeded in stripping you of your safety and casting you out. I prayed this day would never come. I prayed that my suspicions were merely the paranoid ramblings of an old man, as your mother so often likes to tell people. But if you are sitting in front of Mr. Caldwell, then my prayers were not answered, and my preparations were necessary." I looked up at Caldwell. He was watching me with a stillness that felt respectful, his eyes fixed on the letter in my hand. "He knew," I whispered. "He knew they would kick me out." Caldwell nodded slowly. "He did not just know, Ms. Young. He calculated the probability. He understood the nature of your parents' spending and their moral flexibility better than anyone." I looked back at the letter. "Do not believe them, Maisie. That is the first rule. They have spent years telling you that I was senile. They told you I was losing my mind, that I was angry and confused, and that kept you away from me. They built a wall of lies to separate us because they knew that if we spoke, if we really spoke, I would give you the keys to the kingdom then and there." I set the letter aside, my hands shaking so badly the paper rattled against the desk. Beneath it was a stack of documents stapled together with a blue legal cover. The title read, "Certificate of Mental Competency and Neurological Evaluation." I flipped through the pages. There were 3 separate evaluations from 3 different leading neurologists in the state. The dates were staggered over the last 2 years of his life, the exact years my parents had claimed he was too far gone to recognize his own name. The conclusion on the final page was highlighted in yellow. Likely by my grandfather himself, Mr. Duval exhibits 0 signs of dementia or cognitive decline. His reasoning faculties are superior for his age group. He is fully capable of managing his financial and legal affairs. I stared at the words. The room seemed to tilt. They lied. I said, my voice rising in disbelief, they told me he didn't know who I was. They told me it would upset him if I visited. They said he screamed at the nurses. I looked at the date on the last evaluation. It was signed 3 days before my parents had him moved to the high-security memory care unit, the one where visitors were strictly restricted. They locked him away, I said, the realization turning my blood to ice. They locked a sane man away because he wouldn't give them money. Caldwell reached across the desk and tapped a second stack of papers. It was not just about the money, Ms. Young, he said softly. It was about you. He pushed a bundle of envelopes toward me. There were dozens of them, held together by a rubber band that had grown brittle with time. Each one was addressed to me. Maisie Young, care of Gordon Young. I picked up the top one. It was unopened. The stamp was uncancelled. He wrote to you every week. Caldwell said, he gave these to your father to deliver. He trusted that even Gordon would not be cruel enough to intercept communication between a grandfather and his granddaughter. I pulled the rubber band off. It snapped and flew across the room. But I didn't care. I spread the letters out. Birthday cards. Christmas cards. Letters just asking how school was. Letters asking why I never wrote back. I never got these. I whispered. I never got a single one. I know. Caldwell said, your grandfather suspected as much after the first 6 months of silence. That was when he came to me. That was when we set up the Iron Gate Protocol. He opened a folder labeled Timeline of Litigation. This is the part that will hurt. Ms. Young, but you need to see it to understand why you are here. The document was a spreadsheet. It listed dates in the left column and legal actions in the right. January 15th, 2015, petition for conservatorship filed by Marla Young, reason incapacity, status denied by court. March 3rd, 2016, request for power of attorney filed by Gordon Young, status rejected by Walter Duval. September 10th, 2017, emergency motion for control of assets, status dismissed for lack of evidence. The list went on and on. It was a chronicle of a siege. My parents had spent 10 years trying to legally break into my grandfather's vault, and every time, they had been repelled. I traced my finger down the list until I stopped at an entry dated 2 years ago. Status, plaintiff withdrawal. Reason creation of family trust. Fake. I looked up. What does this mean? Caldwell leaned forward. They stopped trying to take the money by force because they realized they couldn't win in court, he explained. So they changed tactics. They decided to wait him out. They isolated him, cut his lines of communication, and waited for him to die. But they had a problem. You, me. I pointed to my chest. I was a mess. I was the disappointment. I couldn't even hold down a corporate job because I was so depressed. You were the heir. Caldwell corrected me. You were the only biological grandchild. In the absence of a will, or under a standard will, you would have a claim, and more importantly, Walter loved you. You were the only person in the family he actually respected. He pointed to the pile of rejected petitions. They didn't hate you because you were useless. Maisie, they hated you because you were the threat. You were the one person standing between them and total control of the Duval estate. If you were competent, strong, and close to your grandfather, their narrative fell apart. So, they had to make sure you were none of those things. The silence that followed was deafening. The pieces of my life, the criticism, the undermining, the rumors Marla spread about my mental health, the way Gordon sabotaged my confidence, it all clicked into place. It wasn't bad parenting. It was a strategic campaign. They had dismantled me so I wouldn't be strong enough to fight them when the time came. I felt sick. A wave of nausea rolled through me, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, hard anger. It started in my stomach and spread to my fingertips, steadying them. "Show me the rest," I said. Caldwell typed a command into his keyboard. The monitor on his desk swiveled around to face me. "Your grandfather established a springing trust," Caldwell said, his voice turning professional again. "A springing trust is a legal instrument that remains dormant, invisible to the world and to the tax authorities until a specific trigger event occurs." He pointed to the screen. The trigger event was defined as Maisie Young presenting the iron key card at the main branch of Irongate Heritage and Trust while declaring a state of distress. I looked at the screen. There was a balance displayed in bold black numbers against a white background. I blinked. I counted the commas. $12,450,000. The air left my lungs. I sat there, staring at the number, my brain unable to comprehend the conversion from my $214 bank account to this. That is a mistake," I stammered. "It is not a mistake," Caldwell said. "And I want to be very clear. Ms. Young, this is the liquidity. This is the cash balance sitting in high-yield treasury bonds and money market accounts that are now instantly accessible to you." He clicked a tab. "This does not include the real estate portfolio, the deed to the commercial warehouse district in the South End, or the land in Montana, nor does it include the securities portfolio." I couldn't speak. I felt like I was floating, untethered from gravity. Yesterday, I was worried about paying for gas. Today, I could buy the gas station. "But," Caldwell said, his voice sharpening, cutting through my shock, "there is a condition." I looked at him. Of course, there was always a catch. What condition? This trust was built as a fortress. He said, "Your grandfather knew that if you ever accessed this money, Gordon and Marla would come for you with everything they have. They will try to claim you are incompetent. They will try to claim the trust is invalid. They will try to bully you into signing it over." He tapped a key, and a new document appeared on the screen. It was full of dense legal text. "This is the protection clause," he said. "The moment you accessed this account, which happened 7 minutes ago, an automatic legal tripwire was armed. If Gordon or Marla Young, or any agent acting on their behalf, attempts to access, query, or file a claim against these assets, a pre-filed restraining order and a cease and desist regarding financial harassment is instantly submitted to the court. Furthermore, any attempt by them to contact you regarding these funds triggers a forensic audit of their own finances, funded by this trust." I stared at him. Grandpa hadn't just left me money. He had left me a loaded gun pointed at my parents' heads. He weaponized the inheritance, I said softly. "He leveled the playing field." Caldwell corrected. "He knew you would not fight dirty, so he built a system that fights dirty for you." He stood up and walked around the desk, stopping in front of me. He looked down, his expression softening for the first time since I entered the room. "Ms. Young," he said, "you are a wealthy woman. You have enough resources here to never work a day in your life. You can walk out of here, buy a house on the other side of the country, and disappear." He paused. "But you and I both know that having money is not the same thing as being safe. Your parents are desperate. They are likely leveraged to the hilt, waiting for this money to fall into their laps. When they find out it is gone and that you have it, they will not just be angry, they will be dangerous." I looked down at the black card sitting on the desk. It looked different now. It wasn't just a piece of metal, it was a shield. But shields are heavy, and you have to be strong enough to hold them up. "I am not safe," I whispered. "No," Caldwell said, "you are not. But for the first time in your life, you are not helpless." He reached into the safe again and pulled out a sleek black smartphone and a platinum debit card. "We took the liberty of preparing these," he said. "The phone has a new number, unlisted. The card is linked to an expense account separate from the main trust. Go to a hotel. A good one. The Four Seasons is 5 blocks away. Check in under your own name. Do not hide." Why, I asked. Why shouldn't I hide? "Because," Caldwell said, his eyes glinting with a steely resolve that mirrored the tone of my grandfather's letters, "Walter wanted them to know. He didn't want you to run away. He wanted you to stand your ground." I stood up. My legs felt unsteady. but the cold numbness was gone. It was replaced by a strange, vibrating energy. It was fear. Yes, but it was also something else. It was the feeling of a prisoner who had just been handed the keys to the warden's office. I picked up the black metal card and slipped it back into my pocket. It felt heavier than before. I picked up the letters, the years of stolen love, and held them against my chest. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell," I said. He nodded. "Don't thank me yet. Ms. Young, the war has just started." I turned and walked toward the door. The handle was cool under my hand. I wasn't walking out into the snow as a homeless girl anymore. I was walking out as a target. But as I pushed the door open and stepped back into the muted activity of the bank, I remembered the line from my grandfather's letter. "If you are reading this, they have done the thing I feared most." I tightened my grip on the letters. And now, I thought, I am going to do the thing they fear most. I am going to survive. Miles Caldwell did not let me walk out of the bank and hail a cab. That was the first lesson of my new life. When you possess the kind of leverage I now held, you do not stand on street corners waiting for a ride. He made a phone call, speaking in low, clipped tones, and within 10 minutes, a black sedan was waiting at the side entrance. He walked me to the car, his demeanor shifting from the stunned banker to a tactical advisor. "Do not go to a motel, Maisie," he said, his hand resting on the open car door. I know I suggested the Four Seasons earlier, but upon reflection, a hotel is too porous. Too many staff, too many guests. Your parents will be looking for you, and they will start with the credit card transaction records of every 3-star and 4-star hotel in the city. He handed a slip of paper to the driver. "This is one of our corporate executive suites." Miles told me, "It is listed under a shell company. The doorman is private security. You will be anonymous there." I sank into the leather seat, the warmth of the car wrapping around me like a blanket. I watched the city blur past the tinted windows. I felt like an imposter. I was wearing the same clothes I had been thrown out in. My hair was still matted from sleeping in the car, but I was being ferried to a safe house like a diplomat under threat. The apartment was on the 24th floor of a building in the quiet part of the financial district. It was sterile, modern, and aggressively safe. The windows were thick, the air was filtered, and the door had 3 locks. I had barely taken off my coat when the buzzer rang. Ideally, I should have been terrified, but the doorman had called up to announce a visitor. "Evelyn Shaw," he had said. "She says she is here for Mr. Duval." I opened the door to find a woman who looked like she was made of steel wire and pearls. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob, and eyes that were intelligent and kind. She carried a heavy leather briefcase. "Maisie," she said. She did not wait for an invitation. She stepped inside and pulled me into a hug. It was not a polite, social hug. It was a fierce, squeezing embrace that smelled of lavender and expensive stationery. I stiffened at first, unused to physical affection, but then I felt my shoulders drop. "I worked with Walter for 30 years, she said, pulling back and holding me at arm's length. I was his archivist, his estate manager, and for the last 5 years, I have been the keeper of his secrets." She walked to the dining table and set the briefcase down. "Sit," she commanded gently. I sat. I was too tired to disobey. She opened the case. It was packed with files, but she bypassed the paperwork and pulled out a heavy steel lockbox. She placed a small key on the table. "This is the physical legacy," she said. "Miles handles the money. I handle the dirt." She opened the box. Inside were deeds to land I had never heard of, commercial lots, a ranch in Montana, a warehouse complex near the airport, but on top of the deeds was a thick manila folder. Written across the front in red marker were 4 words, "If they corner her." I stared at the writing. It was my grandfather's hand. He wrote this dossier himself. Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He spent the last years of his clarity documenting every conversation, every transaction, every threat your father made. He knew they would try to paint you as unstable. He knew they would try to say you manipulated him. This folder contains the counter-argument. I reached out and touched the folder. It felt radioactive. Why, I asked. Why did he go to all this trouble? Because he knew you were the only one who wouldn't sell the soul of this family for a quick payout, she said. And he knew that because of that, they would try to destroy you. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my old phone, the one with 6% battery left. I had forgotten to turn it off. I pulled it out. A notification from my email flashed on the cracked screen. The sender was anonymous. I opened it against my better judgment. You stole what belongs to this family. You think a piece of paper makes you safe? We know where you bank. We know you are alone. Return the card and the access codes by tonight, or we release the medical records. My stomach dropped. The medical records. They meant the therapy notes from when I was 22, when I had gone through a bout of depression after a breakup. My mother had kept copies. She had threatened to use them before, to prove I was unfit for jobs or relationships. They found me. I whispered. Evelyn took the phone from my hand. She read the message, her face impassive. They haven't found you, she said calmly. They are casting a wide net. They are panicking. This is not a threat of strength. Maisie, this is the scream of a predator that just realized the prey has a gun. She dropped my phone into a silver pitcher of water sitting on the table. Hey, I shouted. You do not need that anymore, she said. Miles gave you a secure phone. That device is a tracking beacon. Let it drown. She reached into her briefcase again and pulled out a business card. It was thick, cream-colored, with only a name and a number embossed in black ink. Rowan Pike, attorney at law. You have an appointment with him in 1 hour. Evelyn said, he is not nice. He is not gentle. He does not have a bedside manner. But he is the only lawyer in this city that your father is genuinely afraid of. I looked at the card. Is he expensive? I asked. The poverty mindset still hardwired into my brain. Evelyn smiled. A dry, thin expression. He is extortionately expensive, and you can afford him 100 times over. Rowan Pike's office was not in a glass tower. It was in a converted brownstone that looked more like a fortress than a law firm. The interior was dark wood, leather, and silence. Rowan himself was a man who looked like he had been sharpened. He was lean, wearing a suit that cost more than my car, and his eyes were the color of flint. He did not shake my hand when I walked in. He pointed to a chair. Sit, he said. I sat. Evelyn briefed me. He said, he did not look at any notes. He seemed to have the information downloaded directly into his brain. You are the beneficiary of the Duval Springing Trust. Your net worth is roughly $15 million liquid, another $20 million in hard assets. Your parents, Gordon and Marla Young, are currently underwater on 3 mortgages and have a margin call due on Monday. He looked up at me. They are not going to sue you for the money. Ms. Young, they are going to sue you for your autonomy. They are going to file for an emergency guardianship. They will claim you are mentally incompetent, that you have a history of instability, and that you were coerced into stealing estate assets. He recited their plan as if he had written it himself. How do you know? I asked. Because it is the only move they have, he said. It is the only way to bypass the trust's protections. If they control you, they control the trust. He slid a document across the desk. It was a retainer agreement. I charge $800 an hour, he said, and I require a $50,000 retainer up front. I stared at the paper. Yesterday, $50,000 was an impossible number. Today, it was a line item. What do I get for that? I asked, trying to sound tougher than I felt. You get a wall, he said. You get someone who will take every stone they throw and throw it back with twice the velocity. I am not here to facilitate a family reconciliation. Ms. Young, I am here to ensure that your parents never sign a check with your name on it again. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line. They are my parents, I whispered. It felt like a betrayal. Even after everything, biologically. Yes, Rowan said. Legally, right now. They are opposing counsel, and they are not hesitating. Why are you... I signed. The ink flowed dark and permanent. By the time I left Pike's office, it was 4 in the afternoon. I had not eaten since the night before. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the bank, the meeting with Evelyn, and the confrontation with the lawyer was beginning to fade, leaving behind a hollow, shaking exhaustion. I walked 2 blocks and ducked into a small coffee shop. It was warm inside, smelling of roasted beans and cinnamon. I ordered a black coffee and a bagel, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I took the tray to a small table in the back. I sat down, and the room began to swim. The edges of my vision blurred. The heat of the room clashed with the deep, bone-chilling cold that seemed to be stuck inside me. I tried to lift the coffee cup, but my hand would not cooperate. The cup rattled against the saucer. A wave of darkness washed over me. I slumped forward, my forehead hitting the cool surface of the table. I heard a chair scrape. I heard footsteps. Miss A voice. Male, deep but calm. I tried to lift my head. A hand touched my shoulder. It was firm, grounding. Take a breath, the voice said. I opened my eyes. A man was crouching next to my chair. He was wearing blue scrubs under a gray fleece jacket. He had dark hair and eyes that were scanning my face with professional intensity. He had a stethoscope draped around his neck, looking like he had just come off a shift. I am fine, I mumbled, trying to sit up. You are not fine, he said. You are diaphoretic, and your pulse is thready. When was the last time you ate? Yesterday, I said. He signaled to a server. Bring me a glass of orange juice and a water, please. He turned back to me. He did not leave. He pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down. He did not crowd me. He kept a respectful distance, but his attention was absolute. I am Noah, he said. I am a doctor at the hospital across the street. Are you diabetic? No, I said. Just tired. He watched me until the juice arrived. He made me drink it slowly. As the sugar hit my bloodstream, the gray fog began to lift. I looked at him. He was handsome in a rough, tired way. He looked like he had had a day as long as mine. Thank you, I said. I am sorry to be a burden. He frowned slightly. A person in distress is not a burden, he said. It is a person in distress. He looked at my coat, which was still damp from the snow. He looked at the shadows under my eyes. He asked the question then. He did not ask, "Are you okay?" Because that is a throwaway question. He asked the one thing that mattered. "Are you safe?" he asked. The words hit me hard. Are you safe? My parents had never asked me that. They asked if I was successful. They asked if I was thin enough. They asked if I was making them look good. But they never asked if I was safe. In fact, they were the ones I needed safety from. I felt the tears prick at my eyes, hot and sudden. I looked at this stranger, this tired doctor who had stopped his day to make sure I didn't collapse on a cafe floor. I don't know, I said honestly. He nodded. He took a card out of his pocket and wrote a number on the back. This is my cell, he said. I am on the night shift in the ER tonight. If you feel like you are going to pass out again, or if you need a safe place to sit for a few hours, the waiting room is open and security is tight. He stood up. He did not ask for my name. He did not try to hit on me. He just offered a lifeline. Eat the bagel, he said. I watched him walk away. I sat there for a long time, chewing slowly, letting the food settle in my empty stomach. I looked at the 3 items on the table, the debit card Miles had given me, the folder from Evelyn, and the card from Dr. Noah Mercer. Money, truth, and kindness. I realized then that I had spent my entire life trying to buy my parents' love with obedience. I had thought that if I was just good enough, they would protect me. But they were the wolves. I didn't need a savior. I didn't need Noah to rescue me, and I didn't need Miles to adopt me. I needed allies. I needed a team, and for the first time in 32 years, I was building one. I took out my new secure phone. I dialed the number on the business card Evelyn had given me. Rowan Pike's office. A receptionist answered. This is Maisie Young, I said, my voice steady for the first time that day. Tell Mr. Pike to cash the check. I want to file for a restraining order. Tonight, I hung up. I took a bite of the bagel. It tasted like cardboard, but it also tasted like fuel. I was going to need the energy. The war had started, and I was done being the victim. The gray sedan was nondescript. It was the kind of car that disappeared in a parking lot, a mid-sized model with tinted windows and no bumper stickers. It was the perfect vehicle for someone who wanted to see without being seen. I first noticed it at 10 o'clock in the morning, 2 days after I had left the bank. I was walking from my temporary apartment to a pharmacy 3 blocks away to pick up toiletries. I turned left onto Market Street. The gray car turned left. I stopped to look at a display of winter coats in a department store window, using the glass as a mirror. The gray car pulled to the curb and idled. My heart did a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. Paranoia is a funny thing. It tells you that you are the center of the universe, that everyone is watching you. But in my case, the paranoia had a license plate. I took out my new phone. My fingers felt thick and clumsy as I unlocked the screen. I did not run. I did not scream. I did exactly what Rowan Pike had told me to do during our second meeting. Data wins, he had said, his voice sharp as a razor. If you feel like you are being watched, do not panic. Document it. A feeling is not evidence. A time-stamped photograph is evidence. I pretended to take a selfie. I held the phone up, angled it over my shoulder, and snapped 3 photos of the idling car. I captured the make, the model, and the blurry outline of a figure in the driver's seat. Then I turned and walked briskly into the pharmacy, weaving through the aisles until I found the back exit. When I got back to the apartment, I sent the photos to Rowan. Subject surveillance. Time: 10:15 in the morning. Location Market and 3rd. His reply came 2 minutes later. Received. We are running the plates. Stay inside for the rest of the day. Do not engage. I sat on the floor of the living room, my back against the wall, away from the windows. I felt like a fugitive in a high-end prison, the luxury of the apartment, the stainless steel appliances, the abstract art. The thread count of the sheets felt mocking. I was rich. Ostensibly, I was free, theoretically, but I was currently hiding on the floor because my parents were hunting me. At 2 in the afternoon, my old phone buzzed. I had kept it charged and turned on, sealed inside a Faraday bag Evelyn had given me, only taking it out to check for incoming attacks. It was a number I did not recognize. I set up a separate recording device, a small digital dictaphone Rowan had provided, and pressed play. Then I answered the phone. "Hello," I said. "Maisie." It was my mother. Her voice was not the cold steel she had used on the porch. It was trembling, pitched high with a frantic, breathless quality that I had heard her use 1,000 times to get her way with customer service representatives or stubborn neighbors. "Mom," I said. I kept my voice flat. "Oh, thank God," she breathed. "We have been so worried. Maisie, where are you?" "You just disappeared. Your father has been driving around looking for you for 2 days. We thought you might have done something to yourself. The narrative?" She was building the narrative. "I am fine," I said. "I am safe." "You are not safe," she insisted, her voice dropping into a lower, more urgent register. "You are having an episode. Honey, we know you are. We found the pills in your room. We know you stopped taking your medication." I looked at the dictaphone spinning silently on the table. I did not take medication. I never had. The pills she was talking about did not exist. Or if they did, she had planted them there after I left. I do not take medication. "Mom," I said clearly, "don't lie to me. Maisie, not now. We love you. We just want to bring you home. We can fix this. Gordon has found a wonderful facility upstate, a place where you can rest and get your head straight. Just tell us where you are. A facility." That was the endgame. If they could get me committed, even for 48 hours, they could file for emergency guardianship. They could freeze my assets. They could take the key. "I am not coming home," I said, "and I am not sick." The silence on the other end lasted for 3 seconds. When she spoke again, the trembling mother act was gone. The voice that replaced it was dry, hard, and devoid of any warmth. "You are making a mistake, Maisie. You are wandering the streets with no money and a confused mind. You are a danger to yourself. When the police find you, and they will, it will be much worse. We are trying to do this the easy way. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to save the recording. I emailed it to Rowan and Evelyn. Subject contact. Time, 2:10 in the afternoon. Content threat of institutionalization. An hour later, Rowan called me on the secure line. "You did well," he said. He did not waste time with pleasantries. "But we have a problem. A new document just hit the credit bureaus." "What kind of document?" I asked. "A loan application." He said, "For a personal line of credit? $50,000. High interest? Predatory terms. It was submitted 3 days ago. Allegedly by you." I gasped. I didn't sign anything. I refused to sign. "That was why they kicked me out." "I know," Rowan said. "But the paperwork exists. It has your social security number. It has a signature that looks remarkably like yours. And here's the kicker. The application lists the purpose of the loan as gambling debt consolidation." I felt the blood drain from my face. They are trying to create a paper trail. I whispered, "They want to show a judge that I'm reckless, that I have an addiction." "Exactly," Rowan said. "They didn't cash the loan. They just filed the application to create the record. It is a planted flag. They are building a dossier of a woman spiraling out of control, a woman who borrows money from sharks, sleeps in her car, and refuses help from her loving parents." "But it is a lie," I said. "In court, a lie documented on paper is worth more than a truth spoken in the wind." Rowan said, "But they made a mistake." "What mistake?" "They got greedy," he said. "The date on the application is from the morning after you accessed the trust. But the timestamp on the digital submission is from an IP address inside your parents' house. They forged it, Maisie, and because they were rushing, they left a digital fingerprint." He paused, and I heard the shuffling of papers. "There is more. Miles called me from the bank. Someone tried to access your file again this morning. Not through the front door this time. It was a remote query using an administrative override code. It failed, of course, because of the legacy key lockout, but it shows they have someone on the inside, someone desperate enough to risk their job." I walked to the window and looked out through the blinds. The city looked gray and hostile. "What do?" I asked. "You keep breathing," Rowan said. "You let them play their hand. Every lie they tell is another nail in their own coffin, provided we catch them holding the hammer. I am filing an affidavit of forgery regarding the loan tomorrow morning. And I am sending a cease and desist to your parents regarding the harassment. Will that stop them?" "No," he said. "It will just make them angrier. But anger makes people sloppy." I hung up. The apartment felt too quiet. I needed to see a human face that wasn't trying to analyze me or sue me. I texted Noah. "Are you working tonight?" He replied instantly. "Off at 6. Meet me at the public library on 4th. Lots of people." Safe. I took a cab to the library. I checked for the gray sedan before I got in. I checked again when I got out. I was learning. Noah was waiting by the reference desk. He wasn't wearing scrubs today. He was in jeans and a thick sweater, looking like a grad student. When he saw me, he didn't smile, but his shoulders relaxed. "You look better," he said. "I slept," I said, "and I ate." We walked to a quiet corner of the reading room. The smell of old paper reminded me of my grandfather, and for a second, I felt safe. Noah pulled a small notebook from his pocket. "I have been thinking about your logistics," he said. He opened the notebook. It was filled with diagrams and lists. "You are a doctor." I said, "Why are you doing security consulting?" "Because trauma is trauma, whether it is a broken leg or a stalker," he said, "and you need a preventative care plan." He pointed to the list. "Routine is your enemy right now. Maisie, do not go to the same coffee shop twice. Do not take the same route to your lawyer. If you go for a walk, go to places with cameras, malls, government buildings, banks." He looked at me, his dark eyes serious. "Do you have a check-in system?" "No," I said. "You do now," he said. "You text me every 4 hours. Just a thumbs-up emoji. If I don't hear from you in 5 hours, I call you. If you don't answer, I call Rowan. If Rowan doesn't answer, I call the police." It seemed excessive. It seemed extreme. But then I remembered the gray car. I remembered the loan application for gambling debts I didn't have. Okay, I said. He hesitated, then reached into his bag and pulled out a portable battery charger. Keep your phone at 100%, he said. Always. Your lifeline is electricity. We sat there for an hour. He didn't ask about the money. He didn't ask about the lawsuit. He just talked to me about safe zones, about situational awareness, about how to spot if someone is following you in a reflection. He was teaching me how to live in a war zone. When I got back to the apartment, Evelyn was waiting for me in the lobby. She looked grim. We found something, she said as we rode the elevator up. She opened her briefcase on the dining table. It was becoming a ritual. These revelations of betrayal. She laid out a financial report. It was for a nonprofit organization called the Young Family Foundation. I remember this. I said, my parents started it 10 years ago. They said it was to help underprivileged kids with music education. They hold a gala every year. Evelyn nodded. It was a shell, she said, a piggy bank. She pointed to the expense column. Consulting fees paid to companies owned by your father. Travel expenses for trips that coincided with their vacations. Salaries for administrators that never existed. They drained it. Maisie, over 8 years. They siphoned off nearly $400,000 of donor money. My stomach turned. It was one thing to be cruel to me. It was another to steal from charity. Why does this matter now, I asked. Because the IRS is auditing the foundation next month. Evelyn said, that is the deadline. That is why the pressure is so high. They need to replenish the funds before the auditors arrive, or they go to federal prison. They don't just want your grandfather's money for a lifestyle upgrade. They need it to stay out of jail. It all made sense. The desperation, the risk-taking, the urgency. They were cornered animals. Rowan was right. Evelyn said, this isn't about you. It never was. You are just the obstacle. My phone beeped. It was a text from Noah. Check in. Thumbs up. I sent the emoji back. I looked at Evelyn. They are going to try something big. Aren't they? I asked. Evelyn closed the file. They are writing a script. Maisie, in their heads. This ends with you being declared incompetent, and them being the grieving, burdened guardians who heroically stepped in to manage the estate. They have the loan application. They have the witnesses who will say you are crazy. They have the motive cloaked in concern. She looked me in the eye. They are waiting for you to scream, to break, to act like the crazy daughter they claim you are. I walked to the window. I looked down at the street, 24 floors below. I wondered if the gray car was there, watching the building. I am not going to scream. I said quietly. Rowan had told me that they lost control. Noah had told me to stay charged. Evelyn had told me the truth about their crimes. I turned back to Evelyn. Let them write their script. I said, I am not going to read the lines. I picked up the photos of the gray car I had printed out earlier. I pinned them to the corkboard on the wall of the office area. If they want to fight, I said, I will give them a war. But I'm going to fight it with silence, and I'm going to fight it with facts. The next morning, the war would move to the courtroom, but tonight, I double-locked the door, checked my phone battery, and waited. The trap was set. I just had to make sure I wasn't the one stepping into it. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was not the dramatic, mahogany-paneled arena I had seen on television. It was a windowless room with fluorescent lights that hummed a low, irritating note, and the air was too warm, recycled through dusty vents. I sat next to Rowan Pike. I was wearing a navy blue blazer and slacks that Evelyn had purchased for me the day before. I looked boring. I looked stable. I looked like a woman who paid her taxes and went to bed at 10 o'clock at night. Rowan leaned in close to my ear. His breath smelled of peppermint. Remember the rule. Maisie, he whispered, you are a statue. You do not cry. You do not scoff. You do not make eye contact. If they say you worship the devil and eat glass for breakfast, you look at the table and you take notes. Do not give them the reaction they are begging for. I nodded once. My hands were clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles were white. The heavy double doors at the back of the room opened. My parents walked in. It was a masterclass in performance art. Marla was wearing a soft gray cardigan and no jewelry. Her makeup was done to make her look pale, tired, the very image of a mother consumed by worry. Gordon walked beside her, his hand protectively on her elbow, wearing a suit that was slightly rumpled, as if he had been too distraught to visit the dry cleaner. They did not look at me with anger. They looked at me with a devastating, heartbreaking pity. Marla let out a small, audible gasp when she saw me, bringing a hand to her mouth. Rowan kicked my foot gently under the table. "Eyes down," he murmured. I stared at the grain of the wood on the defense table. Judge Holloway entered the room. She was a woman in her 60s with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the docket, matter of the estate of Walter Duvall, and the emergency guardianship petition regarding Maisie Young. She read. Her voice was dry and bored. My parents' lawyer stood up. He was a man named Mr. Vance, known for high-priced divorces and family disputes. He had a voice like warm syrup. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here today with heavy hearts. My clients, Gordon and Marla Young, are not here to litigate. They are here to save their daughter." He gestured toward me. "Ms. Young has a long, documented history of mental instability," he continued. "3 days ago, she suffered a severe psychotic break. She fled her family home in the middle of the night, barefoot, in freezing temperatures. She has been wandering the city, sleeping in her car, and is currently dissociating from reality." He paused for effect. "We have reason to believe she has been manipulated into accessing family assets she does not understand. She is currently holding a debit device that gives her access to millions of dollars, funds that were intended for a charitable trust. In her current state, she is a danger to herself and to the financial legacy of her grandfather. We are asking the court for an emergency temporary guardianship to freeze these assets and place Ms. Young in a secure facility where she can receive the medical attention she so desperately needs." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. It was such a clean, logical lie. If I didn't know myself, I would have believed him. Marla let out a soft sob. Judge Holloway looked at Rowan. "Mr. Pike," she said, "I assume you have a response to these allegations?" Rowan stood up. He did not use flowery language. He did not sound like syrup. He sounded like a hammer hitting an anvil. "Your Honor," he said, "the only thing my client is suffering from is a surplus of toxic relatives." He picked up a file. "The petitioners claim Ms. Young is homeless. Here is a copy of her current lease agreement for a serviced apartment in the financial district. They claim she is wandering. Here is a sworn affidavit from Dr. Noah Mercer, a trauma specialist, stating he examined her 2 days ago and found her to be oriented, lucid, and physically healthy, albeit suffering from malnutrition due to being locked out of her parents' kitchen." Rowan walked to the center of the room, and regarding the claim that she was manipulated into accessing her grandfather's money, "I would like to submit Exhibit A." He handed a thumb drive to the bailiff. The screen on the wall flickered to life. It was a video recording. The date stamp in the corner was 5 years ago. My grandfather, Walter, sat in his study. He looked frail, but his eyes were sharp. He was looking directly into the camera. Beside him was a younger Miles Caldwell. I, Walter Duvall, being of sound mind, do hereby establish this springing trust for the sole benefit of my granddaughter, Maisie Young, Walter said. His voice was raspy but clear. "I am doing this in secret because my son and his wife have demonstrated a repeated pattern of financial predation. They are not to know of this money until Maisie is safe." Rowan paused the video. The medical records accompanying this video confirmed that Walter Duvall scored 30 out of 30 on his cognitive exams that day. Rowan said, "He was not senile. He was terrified." Mr. Vance jumped up. "Objection," he shouted. "This is ancient history. We are talking about Ms. Young's current mental state. She is being influenced by third parties who want to loot the estate." Rowan smiled. It was a cold, shark-like expression that didn't reach his eyes. "If we are talking about looting the estate, Your Honor, I think we should look at Exhibit B." He nodded to the bailiff. "The petitioners claim they only want to protect the family legacy," Rowan said. They claim they have always acted in Walter Duvall's best interests. The screen flickered again. The timestamp changed. This video was grainy, black and white. It was dated 9 years ago. I recognized the room instantly. It was the library in my grandfather's house. The camera angle was high, hidden on a bookshelf, Evelyn's work. In the video, Walter was sitting in his wheelchair. Gordon was standing over him, his face twisted in rage. Marla was pacing behind him. "Sign the papers." Old man Gordon shouted in the video. The audio was tinny but distinct. "We need the liquidity for the development deal." "Stop being a selfish hoarder. I will not sign," Walter said quietly. "It is bad business." "Gordon, you will lose everything. You don't know anything anymore," Marla screamed. Stepping into the frame, she grabbed the papers from the desk and shoved them into Walter's chest. "You are useless to us. If you don't sign this, we will put you in a home so cheap you will rot in your own filth." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to vanish. On the screen, Gordon grabbed Walter's hand and tried to force a pen into it. Walter pulled away, and Gordon shoved the wheelchair hard. It slammed against the desk. Rowan stopped the video. The freeze frame on the screen showed my father's face contorted in violence. My mother looking on with cold calculation. I looked at my parents. Marla had stopped crying. Her face had gone chalk white. Gordon was staring at the table, a vein pulsing in his temple. Rowan turned to the judge. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "they are not here because Maisie is crazy. They are here because their bank account is empty, and they can no longer bully the person who holds the checkbook." Judge Holloway took off her glasses. She looked at Mr. Vance, then at my parents. Her expression was one of profound disgust. "Mr. Vance?" she said. Her voice was dangerously quiet. "Do you have any evidence to rebut this video? Perhaps a clip where your clients are reading bedtime stories to Mr. Duvall?" Mr. Vance stammered. "Your Honor, I was not made aware of this footage. I need a recess to confer with my clients." "Denied." Judge Holloway snapped. She looked at my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Young, this court sees a lot of family disputes. Usually, there is a gray area. Today, there is only black and white. You have come into my courtroom, wasted taxpayer money, and attempted to weaponize the legal system to strip a grown woman of her rights because you lost your cash cow." She slammed her gavel down. It made a sound like a gunshot. "The petition for emergency guardianship is denied with prejudice. That means do not bring it back to me unless Ms. Young is dancing naked on the freeway. Furthermore, I am granting Mr. Pike's cross motion for a temporary restraining order." She pointed a finger at Gordon. "If you go within 500 feet of your daughter, if you call her, if you text her, or if you send a carrier pigeon to her apartment, I will have you arrested for contempt of court. And given what I just saw on that screen, I would be very careful about your own legal exposure regarding elder abuse statutes." She gathered her papers. "Get out of my sight," she said. Gordon stood up. He looked at me then. The mask of the grieving father was gone. His eyes were black holes of hatred. He mouthed 2 words, "You ungrateful." Rowan stepped in front of me, blocking his view with his broad shoulders. "Walk away." "Gordon," Rowan said, "before I ask the bailiff to assist you." My parents turned and marched out. They did not look back. Mr. Vance trailed behind them, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. I let out a breath I'd been holding for 20 minutes. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't unclasp them. Rowan turned to me. He didn't high-five me. He didn't smile. That was round 1. He said, "You did good. Kid, you held the line." We walked out of the courtroom and into the hallway. The air felt cooler here, cleaner. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was lightness. For the first time in my life, someone had stood up to them and won. Rowan checked his watch. "I have to file the order with the clerk," he said. "Wait here. Do not leave the building." He walked away toward the clerk's office. I stood near the metal detectors at the entrance, watching people come and go. I felt invincible. I had the money. I had the lawyer. I had the judge on my side. My secure phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message. The sender ID was blocked. You think a judge can stop us? You enjoyed the show. Maisie. Good. Enjoy your freedom while you still have it. The law has loopholes. We have friends. The cold dread washed over me instantly, extinguishing the victory. I looked up. Through the glass doors of the courthouse entrance, across the busy street, I saw it. The gray sedan. It was parked in a loading zone. The window was rolled down just an inch. I couldn't see the face, but I saw the flash of a lens. They were taking pictures of me. They weren't retreating. They were regrouping. I stared at the car. The fear was still there. Yes, but something else was rising up to meet it. I remembered the video of my grandfather being shoved in his wheelchair. I remembered the way Marla had screamed at him. They had hurt him. They had terrorized an old man because he was weak. I wasn't weak. Not anymore. I raised my phone. I didn't hide it this time. I walked right up to the glass doors and pointed the camera lens directly at the gray car. I took a picture. Then I typed a reply to the anonymous number. Come and get it. The gray sedan shifted into gear and pulled away, merging into the traffic. It was still a threat. It was still a punctuation mark on their hatred. But as I watched it disappear, I realized that for the first time, I wasn't the one running away. The atmosphere inside Iron Gate Heritage and Trust had shifted. The hush of the lobby was no longer the silence of reverence. It was the silence of a hunting ground. When I arrived at 10 o'clock in the morning, escorted by Noah and a private security detail Rowan had insisted on, Miles Caldwell did not meet us at his desk. Instead, a grim-faced assistant led us directly to a conference room on the top floor. The blinds were drawn. The table was covered in files. Rowan was already there, pacing the length of the room like a caged tiger. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, her hands folded over a thick binder, her expression unreadable. Miles entered a moment later. He looked tired. The perfect knot of his tie was slightly askew, the only sign that the meticulous banker was rattling. We have a problem, I said, sitting down. I didn't ask. I stated it. After the text message yesterday, after the gray car, I knew the leak wasn't plugged. We don't have a problem. Ms. Young, Miles said, closing the door behind him. We have a perpetrator. He walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room. He wrote a name in blue marker, Julian Thorne. Who is that, I asked. He was, until 20 minutes ago, a senior account manager in our private wealth division, Miles said. He has no direct access to the Duval files. However, our internal audit discovered that he has a robust social connection to your mother. They sit on the same fundraising committee for the City Opera. They play tennis at the same club. He turned to face me. Mr. Thorne confessed to accessing the internal query system 3 days ago. He claimed it was an innocent error, a typo while searching for another client. But the logs show he took a screenshot of a summary page. 10 minutes later, your mother called you. I felt a cold shiver. It was so banal. It wasn't a high-tech hack. It was gossip and a favor traded over cocktails. So they know. I said, they know how much money I have. Rowan stopped pacing. They know a number, he said, but they don't know the truth. And that is where they walked right into the buzzsaw. Evelyn opened the binder in front of her. She slid a single sheet of paper toward me. It was a digital log, a complex list of codes and timestamps. Walter knew that banks are made of people, and people are flawed. Evelyn said, he knew that eventually. Someone would look. Someone would try to peek at the hoard before the dragon woke up. So, he built a false bottom. She pointed to the log. The file Mr. Thorne accessed, the one he screenshotted and likely sent to your mother, was a decoy. It is a honeypot file. It looks real. It lists assets. It lists a cash balance. But it is not the master record. It is a trap. I don't understand. I said. Miles stepped forward. In digital security, a honeypot is a system set up to attract attackers, he explained. The moment Thorne opened that file, he didn't just see a fake number. He triggered a silent alarm that logged his keystrokes, his IP address, and the exact duration of his session. It also tagged the data he stole. If that screenshot appears in any court filing, or if your parents use that specific number in any legal document, they are instantly incriminated in federal data theft and bank fraud. He smiled, a thin, sharp expression. Your grandfather didn't just hide the money. Maisie, he tagged it with radioactive dye. Your parents are currently holding stolen, falsified data that will send them to prison if they try to use it. I looked at the name Julian Thorne on the board. My parents had used a friend to spy on me, and in doing so, they had handed me the murder weapon. But if that was a decoy, I asked, what is real? Evelyn flipped the binder open to the middle section. This, she said. She laid out a series of documents. They were heavy, official, stamped with seals from 3 different states. You know about the cash, Evelyn said. The $12 million. That is just the liquidity. That is the war chest. But the real wealth, the power that your father is so desperate to get his hands on, is here. She pointed to a deed. The Duval estate owns 300 acres of prime commercial real estate near the shipping ports, leased to major distributors, passive income of nearly $400,000 a year. She pointed to another, a diversified stock portfolio managed by a blind trust, valued at roughly $8 million. Then she turned the page to the final document. It was a certificate of stock ownership. The name of the company was printed in bold. Gothic letters, Brightwell Freight Systems. I stared at the name. My breath caught in my throat. Brightwell, I said. That is where my father works. He is the chief financial officer. Evelyn nodded. Your father is the CFO. Yes, he is a salaried employee. He owns a small percentage of stock options, mostly unvested. She tapped the document with her index finger. Your grandfather, Walter, was one of the original angel investors in Brightwell 30 years ago. He bought in when it was just 2 trucks and a shed. Over the years, he quietly accumulated shares. He never took a board seat. He never interfered. He just bought and held. She looked me dead in the eye. Maisie, this certificate represents a 35% equity stake in Brightwell Freight Systems. Combined with the voting rights proxy he attached to the trust, you are not just a shareholder. You are the single largest voting block in the company. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table. I own 35% of his company, I whispered. Rowan laughed. A short, barking sound. You don't just own it, he said. You are his boss. Or more accurately, you are the boss of his boss. If you walk into a shareholder meeting, you can move a motion to audit the executive suite. You can vote on board appointments. You can vote on executive compensation. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. It wasn't just about the inheritance money. It wasn't just about greed. It was about survival. I looked at Noah. He was watching me closely, his face grave. That is why, I said, my voice trembling with the magnitude of the truth. That is why they kicked me out. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the skyline. My father has been embezzling from the charity, I said, piecing it together. If he is stealing from a small family charity, he is probably cooking the books at Brightwell too. He needed to hide it. Rowan nodded. Exactly. He is the CFO. He controls the numbers. But if the largest shareholder, Walter, died, those shares would pass to someone. If they passed to you, and you ordered an audit, or if you sold them to a private equity firm that looked too closely at the books, Gordon would be finished. He would be exposed. The cruelty of the eviction finally made perfect sense. It was a tactical strike. They needed to break me. I said, they needed to make me incompetent so they could get guardianship. If they had guardianship over me, they would control the voting rights of the shares. Gordon could use my own stock to vote to keep himself in power. He could use my authority to bury his own crimes. I turned back to the room. The tears that had been threatening to fall earlier were gone. My eyes felt dry and hot. They didn't hate me, I said softly. They feared me. I was the one loose thread that could unravel their entire life. Noah spoke up for the first time. His voice was quiet, grounding. You are standing differently. Maisie, I looked at him. What, when you walked in here 3 days ago? You were hunched over, he said. You looked like you were waiting for permission to exist. Right now you look like someone who just picked up a sword. I looked at my reflection in the darkened glass of the conference room wall. He was right. My shoulders were back. My chin was up. The fear was still there, the gray car was still out there, but the confusion was gone. I knew the battlefield now. Rowan slammed his hand on the table, breaking the moment. "Okay," he said. "We know the why. Now we discuss the how." He started listing tasks on his fingers. 1. We file a civil suit against Julian Thorne and the bank, no offense. Miles for the privacy breach. We use that to subpoena the communications between Thorne and your mother. That gives us the proof of conspiracy. 2. He continued. We commission an independent forensic audit of the Young Family Foundation. We hand that directly to the IRS. We open a second front that keeps them busy and terrified. 3. And this is the nuclear option. We notify the board of directors at Brightwell that the Duval shares have transferred ownership and that the new owner you is requesting a review of the CFO's performance. He looked at me. Are you ready to do that? Maisie, you are going to blow up his career. You are going to humiliate him publicly. There is no coming back from this. I thought about the night on the porch, the snow on my bare feet, the trash bag, the way my mother looked at me in the courtroom like I was a diseased animal that needed to be put down. Do it, I said. Miles cleared his throat. There is one more thing. Ms. Young. He walked back to the safe in the corner of the room. He dialed in the combination and pulled out a small velvet box. He placed it on the table. He did not open it. The card you used, he said, the black metal one. You noticed the crest engraved on the corner. Yes. I said, that crest is not the standard bank logo, Miles said. That is the seal of the founding partners. It dates back to 1920. He tapped the velvet box. When you presented that card, I froze. You thought it was because I was surprised to see a Duval. That was only half the truth. I froze because that card is a signal. In the internal codex of Irongate, that card indicates a level 0 event. He looked at Evelyn, then back at me. Walter didn't just leave you money and shares. He left you a mechanism. He called it the final key. He placed his hand on the box. He gave me strict instructions. This box is not to be opened until the beneficiary understands the full scope of the assets, until she understands Brightwell. He slid the box toward me. The card you have was the key to the door, Miles said. This is the lock that snaps shut behind you. I stared at the box. It was small, black, unassuming, but in the context of this room, with the weight of $12 million and a corporate empire hanging in the air, it looked terrifying. What is in it? I asked. Miles shook his head. I don't know. The bank didn't pack it. Walter did. He sealed it himself 10 years ago. I reached out. My fingers hovered over the lid. Open it, Evelyn whispered. It is the last thing he has to say to you. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in white satin, was not a jewel. It was not a key. It was a simple, silver flash drive, and underneath it, a small scrap of paper with a single line of text written in my grandfather's hand. I picked up the paper. I read it aloud. When they call you crazy, show them the pictures. I looked at Rowan. I looked at Miles. Pictures, I asked. Rowan's eyes widened. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face. The audit, he muttered. Gordon has been cooking the books for years. If Walter was an investor, if Walter was watching, he looked at the flash drive. That isn't just data. Maisie, that is the evidence locker. If your father has been stealing, your grandfather didn't just suspect it. He documented it. I closed my hand around the flash drive. It was cold and hard. They called me crazy, I said, my voice hardening into steel. They told the world I was unstable. They told the judge I was hallucinating. I put the flash drive in my pocket. Let's see how stable they look when the world sees what is on this drive. Rowan clapped his hands together. Gentlemen, Evelyn, Maisie, he said, the defense rests. The prosecution starts now. The war did not happen in the streets. It happened on screens, in whispers, and in the polite, suffocating atmosphere of legal offices. It began with a notification on my social media, then another, then a deluge. I sat in the living room of the safe house, watching my reputation disintegrate in real time. My mother had gone to work. She hadn't posted anything herself that would be too gauche, too direct. Instead, she had mobilized the family network. My cousin Beatrice, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, posted a long, heartfelt paragraph on Facebook asking for prayers for our troubled Maisie, and vaguely referencing a severe chemical dependency. My Aunt Linda shared it, adding a comment about how we always knew something was wrong, and how we hope she accepts the help her parents are begging to give her. It was a masterclass in weaponized concern. To the outside world, they were a loving family reaching out to a prodigal daughter. To me, it was a suffocating blanket of lies designed to destroy my credibility before I could even open my mouth. I threw the phone onto the couch. "They are painting me as an addict," I said to the empty room. Rowan was sitting at the dining table, surrounded by files. He didn't look up. "Let them paint," he said. He flipped a page. "Defamation is a difficult case to win, but it makes for excellent leverage later. Right now, we have bigger fish to fry." He picked up a file and walked over to me. "The gray sedan," he said. I looked up. The car that had been following me. "We got him," I asked. "We didn't just get him," Rowan said, a cruel little smile playing on his lips. "We buried him." He handed me a police report. "His name is Arthur Miller. He is a low-rent private investigator who usually handles cheating spouses. We caught him interfering with the mail at your old address. He was trying to intercept legal notices I sent to your parents. That is a federal offense. Maisie, the postal inspectors do not have a sense of humor." Rowan sat down on the coffee table, facing me. "But that is not the interesting part. The interesting part is what Mr. Miller said when the police offered him a deal to reduce his sentence." I leaned forward. "He gave up his client list," Rowan said. "Gordon Young hired him. But here's the timeline. Gordon didn't hire him 3 days ago when you left. Gordon hired him 2 months ago." The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. 2 months, I whispered. "But I was living in the house." "Exactly," Rowan said. "Miller wasn't hired to find you. He was hired to track you while you were living there. He was building a dossier of your movements. He was looking for anything a bar tab, a late night, a speeding ticket that could be used to prove instability." Rowan tapped the file, and when they didn't find anything, "Because you are boringly responsible, they decided to manufacture the crisis. The night they kicked you out, Miller was parked down the street. He was waiting for you to leave. He was the one who called in the anonymous tip to the police that there was a disturbed woman sleeping in a car near the park, hoping to get you arrested that first night." I felt sick. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision by angry parents. It was a scheduled demolition. They had waited for the weather to turn cold. They had waited until the holidays when the courts were slow. They had planned my homelessness like a business trip. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Hot and angry. I wiped it away furiously. "They set me up," I said. "They wrote a script," Rowan corrected. "And now, we are going to burn the theater down." He stood up and pulled out his phone. "I just came from a hearing with Judge Holloway." I presented Miller's confession. The judge was not amused. "She signed an order compelling your parents to surrender all your personal documents immediately. Passports, birth certificates, social security card. Everything they were holding hostage to keep you dependent. Did you get them?" I asked. Rowan reached into his briefcase and pulled out a large manila envelope. He tossed it onto my lap. "I had a sheriff's deputy serve the order an hour ago." He said, "Your mother tried to say she couldn't find them. The deputy told her she had 5 minutes before he started opening drawers himself." I opened the envelope. There was my passport, my birth certificate, the physical proof of my identity. Holding them felt like holding a piece of my soul that I hadn't realized was missing. They weren't just papers. They were the keys to my autonomy. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me," Rowan said. "This is just housekeeping. Now, we play offense." He walked to the window and looked out at the skyline. "Are you ready to make the call to Brightwell?" he asked. I stood up. I walked to the desk where my secure laptop was open. "I am ready," I said. The letter was not emotional. It was 3 paragraphs of pure corporate lethal force. As the holder of 35% of the voting shares of Brightwell Freight Systems, utilizing the proxy power granted by the Walter Duval Trust, I was formally requesting an independent forensic audit of the company's financials for the last 5 years. I was not accusing anyone. I was simply exercising my right as a major shareholder to verify the fiscal health of the organization. I hit send. 2 hours later, the phone rang. It wasn't my father. It was the chairman of the board at Brightwell. "Ms. Young," the voice said, sounding strained and overly polite. "We received your letter. This is unexpected. We usually handle these matters at the quarterly meeting. An emergency audit is quite disruptive." I looked at Rowan. He nodded. "Mr. Chairman," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I appreciate the disruption. However, given the recent transfer of assets, I need to ensure my investment is secure. I am not asking to shut down operations. I am not asking to fire anyone. I am simply asking you to turn on the lights." There was a silence on the other end. "Turn on the lights?" the chairman repeated. "Very well. We will comply." By 5 o'clock that afternoon, the preliminary data dump arrived. Rowan had a team of forensic accountants on standby. They descended on the spreadsheets like vultures. It didn't take long. At 7 o'clock, Evelyn walked into the room. She was holding a printout, her face pale. "We found it," she said. She laid the paper on the table. It was a ledger of consulting fees. Brightwell Freight Systems has been paying a monthly retainer of $12,000 to a vendor listed as GM Logistics, Evelyn said. "Who is GM Logistics?" I asked. Evelyn placed a second paper on top of it. "It is a shell company registered in Delaware," she said. "The signatory is Marla Young, my mother, and look where the money goes," Evelyn said, tracing a line with her finger. "GM Logistics receives the funds from Brightwell, takes a 10% cut, and then donates the remainder to the Young Family Foundation as a charitable contribution." I stared at the numbers. "They are washing the money." I said, "My father steals it from the company he works for, funnels it through a fake vendor owned by my mother, and then dumps it into their charity so they can write it off on their taxes and use the charity funds for their lifestyle. It is a perfect circle," Rowan said, looking at the papers with professional admiration. "Until you look closely, this confirms Walter's suspicion. Your father has embezzled nearly $800,000 from Brightwell over 6 years. Rowan looked at me. "This is the kill shot. Maisie, if we release this to the board, your father isn't just fired, he is prosecuted. Brightwell will have to sue him to recover the funds. The IRS will descend on the foundation. They lose the house. They lose their status. They lose everything." I sat back in the chair. I thought about the text message. "Enjoy your freedom while you still have it." They had tried to put me in a cage. They had tried to convince the world I was crazy so they could keep this little carousel of theft spinning. "Do it," I started to say. Then the buzzer rang. It was Noah. He came in carrying takeout bags. He looked at the papers covering every surface of the apartment, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. He didn't ask about the case. He walked over to me, took the file out of my hand, and closed it. "Time out," he said. "Noah, we just found the smoking gun." I said, my voice rising. "I don't care if you found a nuclear warhead," he said calmly. "You look like you're about to vibrate out of your skin. Your pupils are dilated. You haven't blinked in 2 minutes." He steered me toward the kitchen. "You are winning. Maisie, I can see that on Rowan's shark-like face, but if you collapse from exhaustion, or if you snap and scream at someone because your blood sugar is 0, you give them exactly what they want." He unpacked the food, grilled chicken, vegetables, boring, healthy food. "Remember the goal," he said. "They want unstable Maisie. They want the girl who shouts and cries. You need to be boring Maisie. Boring Maisie eats dinner. Boring Maisie gets 8 hours of sleep. Boring Maisie destroys her enemies with a calm smile and a well-rested brain." I looked at him. He was right. The anger was a fuel, but it was burning me out. I needed to be cold. I sat down and ate. The food tasted like ash, but I forced it down. After dinner, Rowan gathered the files. "We have the ammunition," he said. "I am going to draft the formal complaint to the Brightwell Board and the IRS whistleblower submission tonight. We launch at dawn." He stopped at the door, his hand on the knob. He turned back to look at me. The triumph in his eyes was dampened by a shadow of warning. "Maisie, you need to prepare yourself," he said, "for what I asked. We have them. We have the theft. We have the smear campaign. We have the PI. We have them on facts," Rowan said. "But narcissists do not care about facts. When they realize the financial road is closed, when they realize they can't call you crazy anymore because the court order blocks them, they will go for the only thing left." "What is left?" I asked. "The heart," Rowan said. He pointed to the portrait of my grandfather that I had set up on the mantelpiece, a small photo I had rescued from the house years ago. "They are going to say you manipulated him," Rowan said. "They are going to say you poisoned an old man's mind against his own son. They will say you are not a victim, but a predator who took advantage of a dying man's confusion to steal his legacy. They will try to rewrite history to make you the villain who broke the family apart." I looked at the photo of Walter. I remembered his hand pressing the black card into mine. I remembered the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for me. "Let them try," I said softly. Rowan nodded. "Get some sleep, kid. Tomorrow, we take their company." He left. I stood by the window with Noah. The city lights were beautiful and cold. I knew my parents were out there, perhaps in their own living room, trying to spin a new web. They didn't know that the PI had talked. They didn't know I had the ledgers. They were sleeping on a landmine. "You okay?" Noah asked. I touched the glass, feeling the chill of the winter night. "I am not happy," I said honestly. "I am destroying my own parents. It feels heavy. It is supposed to feel heavy." Noah said, "That means you are still human. If you enjoyed this, you would be just like them." I turned away from the window. "I don't enjoy it," I said, "but I'm going to finish it." I went to bed. I slept dreamlessly, the sleep of a soldier before the final battle. I knew Rowan was right. The next phase would be the ugliest. They would attack my love for my grandfather. They would try to turn my grief into a crime. But they forgot one thing. I had the letters. I had the truth in his own handwriting. And I had the black card. I closed my eyes. Bring it on. The knock on the door came at 7 o'clock in the morning. It was not a polite rap. It was a heavy, authoritative pounding that signaled bad news. I was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the gray light filtering through the blinds. I had a feeling in my gut, a heavy stone of dread that the victory with the audit was too easy. I knew my parents. They did not retreat when they were cornered. They bit. Rowan opened the door. Standing there was a process server, flanked by a uniformed officer. "Maisie Young?" the server asked, looking past Rowan to where I stood in the hallway. "I am Maisie," I said, stepping forward. "You are being served with a notice of investigation from the State Department of Elder Affairs, along with a temporary injunction freezing all disputed assets pending a criminal inquiry into elder abuse and financial exploitation." He shoved a thick stack of papers into my chest. I grabbed them instinctively. The top page had the state seal embossed in gold. The words, "State Vi. Young" were typed in bold. Black letters. I felt the blood drain from my face. The room tilted. Rowan snatched the papers from my hand. He scanned the first page, his eyes narrowing into slits. "They did it," he muttered. He slammed the door in the server's face. I stood frozen in the hallway. "Elder abuse," I whispered. My voice sounded thin and high, like a child's. "They are accusing me of abusing him." Rowan threw the papers onto the dining table. They slid across the polished surface and crashed into the vase of flowers. "It is the nuclear option," Rowan said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "They know they can't win the competency hearing. They know they are about to be exposed for the embezzlement at Brightwell. So they decided to burn the whole board. By accusing you of financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, they trigger a mandatory state investigation. It freezes everything: the trust, the shares, the accounts. It is designed to strangle you while the bureaucracy grinds on for months. I sank onto the floor. I couldn't breathe. I pulled my knees to my chest. They are calling me a predator, I said. They are saying I tricked him. They are saying I stole from the only person who ever loved me. This was their masterstroke. They weren't just attacking my wallet. They were attacking my memory of him. They were rewriting the last 5 years of my life, turning my relationship with my grandfather into a crime scene. The room began to spin. The walls felt like they were closing in. I could hear my mother's voice in my head, telling everyone I was sick, telling everyone I was dangerous. Maybe I am crazy, a voice whispered in my ear. Maybe I did manipulate him. Maisie. The voice was sharp. A hand gripped my shoulder. I looked up. Noah was crouching in front of me. His face was inches from mine. He wasn't looking at me with pity. He was looking at me with command. Look at me, he said. I looked at his dark eyes. Breathe, he ordered. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. I tried to shake my head. Do it, he said. I took a breath. It shuddered in my chest. Again, he said. We did it 3 times. The spinning slowed. The room settled back into its dimensions. Listen to me, Noah said, his voice low and fierce. This is not reality. This is a tactic. They are projecting. They are the ones who abused him. They are the ones who stole. They are taking their own sins and pasting them onto your face because they have nothing else left. Do not accept the projection. He stood up and pulled me to my feet. He didn't let go of my arm until he was sure I was steady. Go sit down, he said. Drink this water. Let Rowan work. I sat at the table. I drank the water. My hands were still shaking, but the panic attack had receded, replaced by a cold, hard knot of fury. Rowan was on the phone, pacing the length of the room. He was shouting at someone. I don't care if it is a mandatory hold, he yelled. I have exculpatory evidence that proves this complaint is a malicious fabrication filed by suspects in an active embezzlement investigation. He slammed the phone down. He turned to me. He looked like a general who had just decided to stop defending the walls and start shelling the enemy camp. Evelyn, he barked. Open the second box. Evelyn was already at the sideboard. She had the steel lockbox the one Miles had brought over, the one containing the final key flash drive. But she also had a second, larger box that she had brought from her own archives. She opened it. It wasn't paper inside. It was digital media. Hard drives. Tapes. Rowan looked at me. They want to talk about elder abuse, he said. They want to talk about exploitation. Fine. Let's show the state what exploitation actually looks like. He plugged a small digital recorder into the speaker system on the table. Your grandfather was not just writing letters, Rowan said. In the last year, when he realized they were getting desperate, he started carrying a voice-activated recorder in his pocket. He knew they would lie about what was said in those rooms. Rowan pressed play. The audio was scratchy, the sound of fabric rustling against a microphone. Then, a door slammed. Dad, we are done asking. Gordon's voice boomed out of the speakers. It was loud, aggressive. Sign the power of attorney, now. I told you. Gordon, Walter's voice came through, weakum but defiant. The money is not for you to gamble with. It is my money, Gordon screamed. I earned it by putting up with you for 40 years. You are a useless old vegetable. You sit here and rot while I do the work. Just give me the control. That is all that matters. Once I have the signature, I don't care if you die tomorrow. There was a sound of a struggle, a crash, like a lamp falling. Heavy breathing. Don't touch me, Walter gasped. Then sign it, Gordon roared. Sign it or I swear to God I will cut the nursing staff budget and you can lay here in your own filth until the end. Rowan stopped the tape. The silence in the apartment was absolute. I felt sick to my stomach. I had known they were cruel. I hadn't known they were monsters. That is assault, Noah said quietly. That is a felony. Rowan nodded. That is Exhibit A, he said. We have 12 hours of these recordings. Evelyn stepped forward. She placed a stack of papers on the table next to the recorder. And this, she said, is Exhibit B. She opened the file labeled The Charity. Your mother is not innocent, Evelyn said. She likes to play the victim, the dutiful wife cleaning up her husband's messes. But look at this. She pointed to a series of emails printed on glossy paper. These are emails between Marla and the accountant for the Young Family Foundation. Look at the date. 3 years ago. I read the highlighted text. Subject reallocation of funds. From Marla Young. Body. We need to move the $50,000 from the scholarship fund to the GM logistics account by Friday. Gordon needs to cover the margin call. Just mark it as administrative overhead like we did last time. No one looks at the overhead. Evelyn flipped the page. And here's the kicker, she said. Here is a letter she drafted to the board of the foundation, suggesting they cut the music program for inner-city kids because of budgetary constraints. She cut the program to pay for her husband's bad investments. I looked at the signature at the bottom. Marla Young. Director. She stole from children. I said, she stole from everyone, Evelyn said, and she did it with a smile and a string of pearls. Rowan gathered the files. He stacked the transcript of the recording on top of the emails. He added the notarized medical reports. He added the video of Walter declaring his intent. This is the Steele file, Rowan said. It is bulletproof. They filed a complaint based on hearsay and lies. We are going to walk into court tomorrow and drop a mountain of forensic evidence on their heads. My phone rang. It was the secure line. Rowan nodded at me to answer it. It is Miles, I said. I put it on speaker. Mr. Caldwell, Rowan said. Tell us you have good news. I have better than good news. Miles's voice came through, crackling with static. I have a confession. We waited. Julian Thorne, Miles said. The employee who leaked Maisie's data. Our internal security team just finished the interview. He didn't just look at the file for fun. He was paid by who I asked, though I already knew the answer. He received a wire transfer of $5,000 into an offshore crypto wallet 2 days ago. Miles said, but Thorne is not a smart man. He kept the email instructions. He has an email from a private server address, myboyssecuremail.com, giving him the specific account number to query. That is Marla's private email. I said, I recognize the handle. She used it for her online shopping so Gordon wouldn't see the receipts. Thorne confessed that Marla Young instructed him to find anything that looked like mismanagement or irregular activity. Miles continued. She specifically asked if there was any way to insert a document into the file to make it look like you had withdrawn cash illegally. Rowan slammed his hand on the table. Attempted manufacturing of evidence, he shouted, bank fraud, bribery, conspiracy. We are turning the full confession and the server logs over to the FBI in an hour, Miles said. Irongate does not tolerate insiders, but I wanted you to have it for the hearing tomorrow. Thank you. Miles, I said. Rowan looked at me. His eyes were blazing. Do you see it now? Maisie, he asked. They didn't just try to get guardianship. They tried to frame you for a federal crime. They tried to plant evidence in a bank server to send you to jail so they could take the money. The shock had worn off. The fear of the state investigation had evaporated. In its place was a cold clarity. They tried to bury me. I said. Rowan smiled. It was the scariest smile I had ever seen. And they forgot that you are the seed, he said. He picked up the phone and dialed the district attorney's office. This is Rowan Pike, he said into the phone. I am representing Maisie Young. I want to file a cross-complaint against Gordon and Marla Young. The charges are malicious prosecution, filing a false police report, grand larceny, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit bank fraud. Yes, I have the evidence. I have it all. I will see you in court tomorrow at 9 o'clock. He hung up. He turned to me. Evelyn and Noah, get some rest, he said. Tonight is the last night they sleep in their own beds. Tomorrow, we take the roof off. He started packing his briefcase. He stopped when he saw me looking at the small black velvet box on the table, the one containing the flash drive, the final key that Miles had given me. Rowan walked over. He lowered his voice. You know what that is, don't you? He asked. I touched the lid of the box. Miles said it was the lock. I said, Rowan nodded. The card got you in the door, he said. The files we have the recordings. The emails, those are weapons. They will win the battle. But that drive, that is the seal. He looked me in the eye. When Miles saw the crest on your card, he froze because he knew what it meant. That crest activates the Legacy Protective Order. It is a clause written into the founding charter of the bank. It means that the assets in that trust are not just money, they are sovereign territory. He tapped the box. Tomorrow, when the judge sees what is on that drive, she won't just dismiss the case against you. She is going to realize that your grandfather didn't just leave you a trust fund, he left you the gavel. Rowan walked to the door. Sleep well, Maisie. The nightmare ends when the sun comes up. He left. I stood in the center of the living room. Noah was cleaning up the takeout containers. Evelyn was organizing the files for the morning. I looked at the pile of evidence, the recordings of my father's cruelty, the emails of my mother's theft. The confession of their spy. They had called me crazy. They had called me weak. They had called me a thief. I picked up the black box. I put it in my pocket. I wasn't any of those things. I was the witness. And tomorrow, I was going to testify. The air in Superior Courtroom 4 was not warm. It was pressurized, like the cabin of a plane plummeting from 30,000 feet. This was not a preliminary hearing. This was the consolidation of 3 separate legal actions: the state's mandatory investigation into elder abuse, my parents' petition for emergency guardianship, and my own countersuit for fraud. I sat at the defense table. To my left was Rowan Pike, who looked less like a lawyer today and more like an executioner who had just sharpened his axe. To my right was Evelyn, her hands folded over the thick black binder that held the history of my family's sins. Behind the bar, sitting in the public gallery, were Miles Caldwell and Noah. Miles looked like a statue carved from granite. Noah looked like a coiled spring, his eyes fixed on the back of my head, radiating a silent strength I could physically feel. Across the aisle, my parents sat. They were putting on the performance of their lives. Marla wore black, not mourning black, but a soft, textured charcoal that screamed concerned mother. She held a tissue in her hand, dabbing at eyes that I knew were perfectly dry. Gordon sat hunched forward, his usually arrogant posture replaced by the weariness of a man carrying a heavy burden. They looked small. They looked victimized. They looked exactly like the loving parents they claimed to be. Judge Holloway entered. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge sat down, arranged her robes, and looked over the rim of her glasses. She did not look happy. She looked like a woman who had seen too many lies and was tired of sifting through the mud. Mr. Vance, their lawyer, stood up first. He walked to the center of the room, his voice trembling with manufactured emotion. Your Honor, he began, we are not here to attack Maisie Young. We are here to save her. My clients have watched their daughter spiral into a mental health crisis. We have evidence that she has been manipulated into stealing sensitive financial instruments. We have evidence that she coerced a confused, dying man, her grandfather, into changing his estate plans. He pointed a shaking finger at me. This is not a case about money, Your Honor. This is a case about elder abuse. We are asking the court to freeze these assets and place Ms. Young under the care of her parents, where she can get the help she needs. Marla let out a soft, audible sob. Gordon put his arm around her. It was perfect. It was sickening. I looked at the table. I remembered Noah's voice. Boring Maisie. Do not react. I kept my face blank. I wrote the word lies on my legal pad, over and over again. Judge Holloway looked at Rowan. Mr. Pike, she said, the state takes allegations of elder abuse very seriously. Do you have a response? Rowan stood up. He did not walk to the center of the room. He stood at his table, rigid and cold. We do, Your Honor, Rowan said. We agree that this is a case about elder abuse. We agree that Walter Duvall was manipulated and terrorized. We only disagree on who the abuser was. Rowan picked up a single file folder. The petitioners claim my client is unstable, Rowan said. They claim she has been wandering the streets. He walked to the bench and handed a document to the clerk. This is a sworn affidavit from Arthur Miller, a private investigator hired by Gordon Young. Mr. Miller confirms he was paid $5,000 to stalk Maisie Young for 2 months while she was living in her parents' house. He confirms he was instructed to wait outside the house on the night of December 15th, the night they evicted her, to document her distress for future litigation. The judge frowned. She picked up the paper. They hired a PI to stalk their own daughter, she asked. To build a dossier. Your Honor, Rowan said, it was premeditated, but that is just the setup. Rowan went back to the table and picked up the heavy binder. They claim my client stole financial data. They claim she hacked the bank. Rowan pulled out the confession from Julian Thorne. This is a confession from a former employee of Irongate Heritage and Trust. He admits to accepting a bribe from Marla Young to leak confidential account information. He admits to receiving instructions via email to plant false evidence in the file. The room went deadly silent. Marla stopped dabbing her eyes. Her hand froze halfway to her face. Judge Holloway looked at the confession. Her eyebrows shot up. Bribery, she asked? Conspiracy to commit bank fraud. Rowan nodded. But the centerpiece of their argument, Your Honor, is that Maisie Young manipulated her grandfather. They claim Walter Duvall was senile. They claim he didn't know what he was doing. Rowan signaled to the bailiff. I would like to play an audio recording, admitted into evidence as Defense Exhibit C. This was recorded by Walter Duvall himself, 3 months before his death, using a device he kept hidden in his wheelchair. Rowan pressed a button on his laptop. The audio boomed through the courtroom speakers. It is my money, Gordon's voice roared, filling the space with terrified rage. You are a useless old vegetable. You sit here and rot while I do the work. Just give me the control. Sign it, or I swear to God I will cut the nursing staff budget. I watched my father. For the first time, the mask slipped. His face went gray. He looked at the speakers as if they were possessed. He started to stand up, then sank back down. Realizing there was nowhere to go, the recording continued. The sound of the struggle. The sound of my grandfather gasping, "Don't touch me." Rowan stopped the tape. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a narrative shattering into a million pieces. Judge Holloway slowly took off her glasses. She looked at Gordon Young. Her expression was no longer one of judicial neutrality. It was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Is that your client's voice? Mr. Vance was sweating. He wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. Your Honor, the context. We would need to verify the authenticity. Judge Holloway slammed her hand on the bench. The authenticity is verified by the fact that your client looks like he is about to vomit, she snapped. She turned to my parents. You came into my court alleging elder abuse. You accused this young woman of the very crimes you were committing. You terrorized a dying man. You embezzled from your own company. You stole from a charity. And then you tried to destroy your daughter's life to cover your tracks. She looked at the pile of evidence Rowan had submitted. This is not a guardianship hearing anymore, she said. This is a crime scene. She was about to bang the gavel, to issue the ruling that would end them. When Miles Caldwell stood up in the back of the room, Your Honor, he called out. The judge paused. Who are you? She asked. I am Miles Caldwell, branch manager of Irongate Heritage and Trust, Miles said. He walked forward, past the bar, holding a small black velvet box. I beg the court's indulgence, Miles said. There is one final piece of evidence. It pertains to the jurisdiction of the assets. He placed the box on the defense table in front of me. He looked at me, giving a small, almost imperceptible nod. Open it. Maisie, he whispered. I opened the box. Inside was the flash drive, the final key. Miles turned to the judge. The card, Ms. Young used to access the bank. The black iron card has a seal engraved on it, Miles explained. I recognized it immediately, which is why I froze the accounts. That seal belongs to the founding partners. It is a fail-safe mechanism known as the Legacy Protective Order. He pointed to the flash drive. Walter Duvall knew his son would try to challenge the will. He knew the state would get involved. So, he invoked a clause from the bank's charter of 1924. This clause states that if the heir is threatened with legal coercion, the assets do not just freeze, they enter a state of sovereign trust. Miles looked at my parents. It means that as of this moment, Irongate Heritage and Trust serves as the absolute guardian of the estate. No power of attorney, no guardianship order, and no state investigation can touch those funds without federal intervention. The bank has reviewed the evidence on this drive, the ledgers of the embezzlement from Brightwell, the theft from the charity, and we have concluded that the threat to the heir is credible. Miles turned back to the judge. Irongate is hereby moving to permanently bar Gordon and Marla Young from any claim against the Duvall estate. We are also submitting this drive to the district attorney and the Securities and Exchange Commission as evidence of grand larceny and corporate fraud. The judge looked at Miles. She looked at the terrified faces of my parents. She looked at me. She picked up her gavel. Motion granted, she said. She turned to Gordon and Marla. The petition for guardianship is dismissed with extreme prejudice. The temporary restraining order is made permanent. You are to have no contact with Maisie Young for the rest of your lives. She looked at the bailiff. Take them into custody, she said. The district attorney is waiting downstairs to discuss the embezzlement charges. Gordon stood up. He was shaking. He looked at me across the aisle. His eyes were wide, frantic. Maisie, he pleaded. Maisie, please. We are your family. You can't let them take us. We did this for us. For the family name. I stood up. My legs were steady. My hands were not shaking. I felt a strange lightness in my chest, as if a heavy coat I had been wearing for 30 years had finally dropped to the floor. I looked at my mother. She was crying real tears now, tears of a woman who realized the party was over and the bill had arrived. Maisie, she whispered, don't do this. I walked to the railing. I looked them both in the eye. I didn't scream. I didn't shout. I spoke in a voice that was calm, quiet, and absolutely final. You are right, I said. You are my family. I paused. But you are not my home. I pointed to the door where the deputies were waiting. I am not abandoning you, I said. I am escaping. I turned my back on them. I heard the jingle of handcuffs. I heard my mother scream my name once, a sharp, desperate sound that was cut off as the heavy oak doors swung shut. Then, there was silence. I looked at Rowan. He was smiling. He closed the black binder with a satisfying thud. It is done, he said. I looked at Noah. He was leaning against the railing, his arms crossed. He didn't say anything. He just nodded, a look of profound respect in his eyes. I looked at Miles. Thank you, I said. Miles picked up the black velvet box. He took the flash drive out and handed it to me. Then, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the black metal card. He held it out. This belongs to you, Ms. Young, he said. I took the card. It was cold and heavy in my hand. I ran my thumb over the engraved name Walter Duvall. I thought about what he had told me all those years ago. It is a door. He was right. It was a door, but he hadn't told me what was on the other side. He had let me find out for myself. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was bright with winter sunlight streaming through the high windows. I didn't look back at the closed doors behind me. I didn't look back at the wreckage of the people who had raised me. I walked down the marble steps, past the reporters who were already gathering, past the gray car that was now being towed away by the city. I stood on the sidewalk. The air was cold, biting and fresh. I looked at the card in my hand one last time. It wasn't a credit card. It wasn't a weapon. It was a key, and for the first time in my life, I had used it to lock the door behind me. The prison was empty, and I was free. Thank you so much for listening to Maisie's story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from right now. Please drop a comment below, and let's share our thoughts on this journey together. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, And hit that hype button so we can share this story with even more people.